What's up guys, D2 from D2AoV.com, and today I'm going to be going over the tier list that I posted last week. I'm currently in an undisclosed location in the United Kingdom with TJ playing League of Legends in the background. Yes, he is a traitor, but that's all well and good. Let's get on to it. And I haven't been able to make this video because of obviously been busy with casting and all that kind of stuff with the Valor series. By the way, you can check out the Valor series, which is always going to be embedded on my site over on the right hand side here. And you can also check a lot of pro VODs, whether it's the RPL, whether it's the GCS, by going over here as well. So make sure you check that out if you want to get your fix of professional AoV. But that aside, this is a tier list for solo queue, so let's get on right to it. Starting with the intro, this is basically the same thing. The changes from my last list in January was I added a couple of lists from professionals over at the bottom. That's from Rez and from BM Gaming, European and an NA organization respectively. I also added the previous rankings from my previous list. If you go down, for instance, it'll say previous list here, blah, 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 number, blah, 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 overall. And that just kind of gives you a little bit of context as to why I will talk negatively, for instance, about a hero in S, it's because they've dropped, or, you know, positively about someone in tier 2 or something because they've risen. I think it gives some context to where I'm placing these heroes, and I kind of like them, even though it opens me up to a lot more criticism when I'm specifically ranking every single hero. But let's get to the next part, which is the more viable heroes than ever. So previously in tier lists, I would say that, you know, tier 2 and above are the viable heroes for pro play, but I would say that every single hero now, yes, every single hero in Arena Valor is somewhat viable for pro play. It depends on the situation. I have, spoiler alert, Vera at number 2 from the bottom, and I still think there might be situations where she could be useful, for instance, to counter certain assassins. But we'll get onto that later. The point is, a lot of heroes moved up. Okay, let me just explain. So I had to move a bunch of heroes down in order to actually have a 4-tier list or 5-tier list if you could include SS, which means that it seems like some heroes are moving down, but the overall level moved up because at the bottom there's no longer any terrible heroes. And so that makes it seem like I'm dropping certain heroes. Like, for instance, I dropped Vera from tier 3 to tier 4, but actually that wasn't her dropping, that was other heroes moving up. So you have to think of it that way. And here I just basically, my unpopular opinion alert, in order to separate all those heroes into 5 separate tiers, I had to make sure that I was being as opinionated as possible, which is funny because when I posted this already, people were like, oh, this is your best tier list yet, which I don't know how to feel about that. Kind of a little bit awkward. Last thing is that we are in the side lane ADC meta, or the side lane something meta. The fact that you get so much more gold with that melee minion in the ADC, or excuse me, in the abyssal lane is absolutely massive. So you gotta make sure that whoever you want to farm up the most is going to be in that lane, and that is extremely important. So it allows for things like double marksman, allows for things like putting your mage there. The other day we saw, I believe it was TDC played Sun in the, Sun played Loriel in the Abyssal lane, which was absolutely nuts, and they ended up crushing that game, which is crazy. Also the reason why I don't put roles in my tier list, or I should say I don't split up my tier list into roles. I just put the roles here, and you get to figure it out for yourself where you like to play them the most. Although, my suggestion is the first role. Anyway, let's get to it. Let's start with number 1. And this is Zinnia in Heroes, so hopefully my voice isn't gone by the end of this. Number 1, Elsu. So, Elsu was number 4 overall last time. I kind of put him in SS just as a concession. Be like, yeah, I guess he's still good, but he's proven that he's absolutely ridiculous. You don't even have to hit your snipes, you just have to build him auto attack, and he's still really, really good. He does a ton of damage, and it's really hard to lose, it seems like, especially when you're playing in Plat, which I've had to go through while being in EU this week, or these last couple of weeks. And he's just so good on lineup because even if you don't hit snipes, you're doing so much for your team. And the fact that he has disengaged to get away, which is a lot better than what most marksmen have as far as getting away from danger, is absolutely massive. So, yeah, he deserves his spot up there. Number 2, Richter. This is a bit of a controversial one in some people's opinion because Richter doesn't seem all that great. I would say he's just not flashy, but he has basically no weaknesses, and he has plenty of strengths, and that's what makes him so amazing. Particularly when you can just turn on Hunter's Mark at the end of the game and jump in 5 people, and it's fine. Side note: his second role is support. Now that he's been seeing as support in certain leagues, you see J-Jock playing him a lot, for instance. Number 3, I have Quillin, and this is where the list diverges from pro play a lot, because Quillin isn't super top tier in pro play, but on ladder he's still absolutely nuts, and it's extremely hard to play around him unless you have a team that can play around him. I feel like the reason why he is not always banned in pro play is because you can come up with a lineup, you can come up with a team composition to counter, but I would say outside of Conqueror level ladder play, you won't see a team perfectly draft a composition to counter. If you get to Diamond, you get to Low Masters. It's all people can do to put 5 separate roles together, nevertheless put together an actual comp that counters something like Quillin. So he's absolutely nuts in solo queue, and you should continue to play him if you think that you can get away with him and not get him banned. Number 4 is Florentino, and I've already had some complaints about this. Florentino, isn't he stronger than Richter? And I gotta say, I think I agree. Since making this list about a week ago, I think I agree. I really underestimated how much the ease of use buff to him changed things. I've seen Florentinos who had no idea what they were doing, and yet they were still ridiculous and dominating the game. So, honestly, even just a week later, I think I might have to stick Florentino number 1. I'm sorry to make that change already. I'm not sure if I'm going to officially make the change, but if you were to ask me right now, I would say Florentino probably deserves to be number 1 because he's just absolutely ridiculous, and he is no longer difficult to play. You just mash buttons, and he does a lot of damage, and that's really, really good. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I definitely acquiesce to the criticisms about Florentino. I think if you ask me right now, I think he's number 1. All right, moving on. Let's go on to Sephra. This was a last-minute change. I was thinking of putting her on the top of S, but I was like, you know what? She's pretty clearly above all the other mages. It's pretty nuts to think about it because, like I mentioned here, she doesn't seem that great until you face her from the other side. And when you do, she's absolutely nuts because you can't dive her, and she just pokes you like crazy. And then when her teammates even get low, she can heal them as well. It's so ridiculous to play against her, especially playing against a good Sephra. And that's the biggest deal, right? Because when I started playing Sephra, I wasn't good at her. It's hard to land the walls of water. But when you start getting used to her, you start landing all those walls of water. You're poking people like nuts. Once you get Apocalypse build up, and you can my most favorite build with her is to go Apocalypse into Hecate's, and obviously you get Hecate's, but you also get Boomstick. And with that build, with 1 Water Spirit and an auto attack, you can chunk a squishy down to like less than half their health. It's so nuts, and I definitely recommend that to you guys. Just build her as damagey as possible and get better at popping Tide of Life at the right time and not dying, because she is a terror. Lastly, we have Lindis. I think on ladder people aren't as gung-ho on Lindis as the pros are, and there's really no reason for that. It's not like she is a specific counter to anything. You just pick her and she's good. I think people just are kind of sick of her on ladder, and this is my reminder to everyone that Lindis is still really, really good, and you should probably just pick her because that will win you games. Let me just check something real quick. All right. Next, so Tier S heroes. What I did with this list is I dropped a bunch of people from Tier S under the basically explaining that from Tier 1 below, they're all situational heroes. So you might see some heroes in Tier 1 that you believe will be better than heroes in Tier S under a lot of situations, but I made the definition of Tier S hero basically heroes that are always great under any circumstances, right? There might be heroes in Tier 1, again, that are just amazing, even better than heroes in Tier S under like specific situations, but these are the non-situational heroes. And we start off with Raz, who's always going to be great. Obviously, that one exception is going to be against Sephra, but even against Sephra, if you're good enough, you can still beat her. It's only a soft counter, it's not a hard counter. You should be fine. Next, Liliana, same thing, kind of soft countered by Sephra, but she can still do poke damage. You don't really need to dive her to deal your damage. And she's just always going to be great unless you need a very specific hero, like a Kali or something. Moving on, Annette, she moved from 30 to 9 because she's been absolutely ridiculous. And it's one of the things I've done is I haven't put any true supports in tier S because, as all of you know probably, unless you're with a 5 stack, you're not going to get much done sometimes as support. Sometimes you can completely carry the game, especially if your team is with you and on board. The biggest example of that is Mina. If she's always setting up kills, but if your team's not right behind you to capitalize on you setting up a kill perfectly for your team, literally nothing's going to happen. And so that's why I don't have true supports in tier S. This is a long-winded way of saying that Annette can be more than just a true support. She can provide that damage. She can provide that healing to your allies. And healing is really nice. I'm going off on 5 tangents, but healing is really nice because it allows you to affect the game even for your allies that are too stupid to realize that they should be following up on your engages. So if you have allies that can follow up on engages, good. You have wind cuffs, you have gust force, you have hurricane wall. If you have teammates that are just dumb and they just need healing overall, you have that. And if they're completely useless and you need to do all the damage yourself, then they also have that. So that's basically able to do all of that, and that's why you put them up there. Part of the reason I had her lower, by the way, it's really hard to land wind cuffs. Or I thought it was really hard to land wind cuffs. That's why I was like, well, it's not always reliable, some of her CC. But now with the buff to Hurricane Wall, that's just an amazing tool right now. And on top of that, wind cuffs is way easier than I thought it was to land because you can be a few pixels off basically and still land it. It just has to be kind of in the vicinity. I didn't realize that. So yeah, a bit easier than I imagined, which definitely helps her. That was a long time on Annette, so let's just zoom through these ones. Yabeth is pretty similar to Annette. He can do damage, he has CC. He can zone control with his Nature's Realm. So basically the same thing. He's kind of like a triple threat. And that's why you can carry even when you're playing support in a game in which your allies aren't doing anything. Next is Teamy. He rose from 53 to 11, and that's due to a lot of things. First of all, he's the #1 babysitting support because you don't take any farm from your teammates in the Abyssal Lane. In fact, if you have Waterstone, you add farm to them, which is absolutely nuts. You can also just get Ring of the Fiend to just have crazy mobility and being able to use your abilities just off cooldown all the time. So all of the new changes to the game around him helped. Obviously, he got the buff to his Pooty Poots and that cooldown reduction. So there are just so many things that combine together to boost Teamy right back up to the top of the rankings. So go ahead and pick him. Next one, Zephys. He's just kind of in the same exact place. People just passed him in the rankings. He went from 10 to 12. Same exact as before. Just no weaknesses. Pretty solid overall. And yeah, he's good. He's just good. Quillin is next. Quillin rose from number 36. He was kind of dropping before, but then they gave him this stealth buff. Go click on this link if you want to figure what that is, or just, I guess, subscribe to the channel so you can see that. He basically gets 50% extra range, which is nuts. And it just opens up so many more possibilities for him because he can engage, he can escape at any single time. And everything opens up because of that extra mobility, extra ability to make plays. Next is Xenial. Xenial's gotten a bit better because he's part of the Immortal comp, which is Teamy, Xenial, Sephira. And if you are able to draft all 3 of those heroes in a single game, then you're probably going to win the game because you're never going to die. And you can protect an ADC for literally ever. So he has risen in that rankings. His ult is just so much more powerful now. Because of what's being played, because you need to be protecting those ADCs when they get in trouble, and because they're going to be dove upon by assassins all the time. And yeah, he's always been really good, but now he's just slightly better than he used to be. Coming at number 15, Omen rose basically with Xenial because you need an Omen there to prevent Xenial from doing his thing. Xenial hops over to the fight, then you tear down towers. You can also just stun him out with Death's Beacon if you want to prevent him from going to the team. So Omen is kind of the Xenial, not counter, but suppressant. You can't just willy-nilly pick Xenial because you might get omened. Next is Murad. He's in exactly the same place. He's gotten better in pro play. but on ladder he's exactly the same. He's just a terror to the back line, and with all these ADCs being played, it's really nice to have him because you can just go in, tempo turbulence, get out, and they're chunked, and then you can just go back in and do it again and again and again. One moment while I drink some water. Alright, next is Ryoma. I know you guys are probably wondering why I call him Ryoma on cast. That's how you say it in Japanese, and they can't go away from it. Pretty similar as before. He just an extreme amount of damage. If you catch someone in Naginata Jutsu and then Wailing Blade, you're pretty effed. So yeah, there's this weird compositions where you have a marksman jungler and then you stick Ryoma in the abyssal lane and kind of have a pseudo marksman so that they don't run you over in that lane. So he's multifaceted in that way. He can play jungle, he can play either side lane. So just very, very flexible. He does a ton of damage. All right, moving next hero, Nekroth. I moved him up from 59 to 18. I've never really been high on Nekroth. I always felt that people were like, "Oh, he's so hard to play. If you're a god Nekroth, then you're the best." But I just don't really. I think people overestimate him. But I have acquiesced a bit. I've moved him up all the way to number 18, and part of that is not because of his ability to fight, but more his ability to just be really flexible. He can split push better than any other assassin with that mobility, and I like his ability to follow up on engages, and with all the poke damage in today's game, that's really nice. Like if you have a Kali, for instance, like Kali and Nekroth are a weirdly good combo because Kali can deal the poke damage and Nekroth can just jump in really quick, get the kill, and run away. Whereas other assassins, they're good at blowing people up from 100 to 0. Nekroth is really good at like 50 to 0ing people, right? So if they're hurt, he can get in, kill them, get out, and that's really important because other assassins sometimes they can't really get out. So I have moved him up quite a bit because of his flexibility, but I don't like people saying he's the best jungler because if you just have to be good and just get good, and it's like, no, even if you're the best, sometimes he's limited. Just ask Vex. All right, next Tel'Annas is all the way up to number 19. Some people have even argued for her to be even higher than this. She does this ridiculous damage from ridiculous range, and she has so much more protection than before because people are really on the ball as far as protecting the ADC. And the one thing that's nice about her, and the reason why she's ahead of, for instance, Violet, is that when she gets someone in her Eagle Eye, she can finish them off, right? Violet can chunk someone from like 100 to 30%, just completely demolish someone with one tactical fire. But Telos will kill them outright. She'll just, once you get stuck in it, if they use their mobility, or if they try to like dive you and miss, like for instance, like Zephys, for instance, comes in, misses death from above, Telos will just kill him right there. And there's nothing you can do about it. If they ever use their mobility, Telos will kill them in an instant, whereas other heroes will just chunk them down. And that's really big. Next is Crushed. His Metamorphosis is always really going to be good unless you're going against Yebuneth, and even then you can kind of make it useful. He's basically an ult bot, but that's okay. He's useful. I guess he's useful outside of his ult. You can be a nice babysitter. But his Metamorphosis is so powerful that in any sort of team fight, which, in solo queue you can have a lot of team fights, it's going to be always good. Moving on, another hero, Malik, always going to be at the top as long as they don't change things drastically. His cleave is just so massive, his shock's really good engage. Even if he gets demolished in lane, doesn't really matter because you can come back with his tools, which are nuts, and he will always have insane damage on his cleave, even if you build full defense. Next is Marja. Marja is... I think people are just getting away from Marja for some strange reason. She's just boring. People played Marja like non-stop before. But she's still good. There's nothing wrong with her. The only issue with her now is that she just loses really, really badly to Florentino, but then again, so does everyone else. But other than that, she's good in every single situation, which is why keeping her in S rather than dropping her down. She's kind of like your prototypical tier S, right? She's just good in every single possible situation, but not like amazing, which is why she's near the bottom of tier S. Violet's dropped a bit. She's kind of like Marja in the same way. She's never bad, but there's fewer and fewer situations in which she's like amazing. She does, however, still outrange towers with tactical fire. So if you want a fallback choice like Tel'Annas, for instance, or you just need a little bit more ability, then Violet can be a better choice. And she's just amazing at chunking people down. She's amazing at killing towers. So she's what I'm trying to say is I could never like drop her from tier S unless something crazy happens. Next is Lubu. Lubu is just falling off from Omen because you need to like lock people down sometimes, like if you're going against like a Richter, for instance, and you want to kill him. But he's still pretty solid. He's just not quite as good as dueling as the top heroes, but he's always going to be there, especially for those Lubu mains who have 1,000 games played on him. Lastly is Roxy. Roxy's kind of like the odd one now. It's the only people I've seen play her are like Nova EU. But she's always going to be pretty amazing, and she can duel pretty well in the DS lane. And outside of that, she can be a real big nuisance, just stealing jungle out from under you. And whenever you have a good old poke comp, good old fortress comp, she can snag that front hero, and they're going to die no matter how tanky they are. So she's always going to have a place. But she does bring up the rear of tier S. And with that, we drink some water and get to tier 1. So, starting off with Superman. Superman, people are a bit upset with this one that I dropped into tier 1, but he is still top of tier 1. He is like the best situational hero, is what I'm trying to say here. Because he's not always going to be able to duel very well. Sometimes if you pick him in a game, he'll just lose to people in the DS lane like Florentino. And I mean, obviously, a lot of tier S heroes will lose to Florentino as well, but I mean, he'll lose to like Marja, he'll lose to like a lot of these heroes. And just get too chunked down, and he can't just stand there and fight. Like he's all about displacement and all about doing like burst damage, but he can't just stand there and fight, which makes him basically situational. And sometimes you want a hero that's not exactly like Superman to man that side lane. But among the situational heroes, he is definitely number 1 because of all the havoc he can create. Next is Crickneck, and I put him as situational as well because he does ridiculous bursts, but sometimes you want to be able to get away as well. Obviously, he can get away by just killing everyone, but that's not always possible. If you want to watch some good Crickneck play, click on this link. First one, absolutely nuts. Just play very safe with him and get in when you can. You have to pick your spots well, and if you do, then you will kill everyone, and they can't kill you. So that's perfectly fine. Crickneck's still a good hero, but he is a little bit more situational than before. Next, I have Rourke. Every pro has Rourke really high, and I don't really understand it. Because you don't really see him that much in pro play, and I'm guessing he's just dotting the Conquer ladder a lot. That's all I can say about that. Unfortunately, I'm not on the Conquer ladder, so I can only hear from other people. But apparently people in Conquer don't know how to deal with him, because he just walks up to you and kills you. But I did move him up accordingly. And yeah, I've seen some good play out of him, both on the pro ladder and in the undisclosed location on ladder in which I reside. But I think he's fine. I think he's good. As a nod to the pros, I stuck him up here. They would still have him higher, but I can see how he's very powerful. And you get in there, do your damage, and you have to basically wait for determination to run out before you even think about killing him. And that's a really powerful tool that he has, especially when you're trying to contest objectives and that kind of thing. So very, very powerful. But for the time being, I'm not moving him up. I'm sorry. Next is Wonder Woman, which it's weird because Wonder Woman has suddenly moved to the jungle. I feel like people overreacted to that patch a couple of patches ago, which said she has a maximum of 100 damage to jungle monsters, which doesn't mean she does 1,000 damage to jungle monsters. It just says that there's a cap, or it's move the cap up. Excuse me. Which, okay, I guess. Her value as a jungler is to just hold the fort for ADCs and mages to get farmed up, and that's really nice because you don't have to lose the early game with her. You know, you can just, if you have a really slow building marksman like Morin, for instance, you can have Wonder Woman start the game off well for you and you don't fall too far behind, and then you transition well into your late game because she has those great engage tools, particularly around the early Abyssal Dragon. Next is Wisp, who has made a pretty meteoric rise from number 58. I would say she's the second best, like somewhat immobile marksman behind Tel'Annas, as far as like the consistent damage, consistent DPS, right? Sustained damage, because Violet has the tactical fire, but Wisp can just absolutely demolish someone from 100 to 0. She also has AoE damage and loose cannon, and her shock and awe. So I think that she's one of the best marksmen right now. You should go try her if you want someone to be in that best lane. Get away from the Yorn, go to the Wisp. She is the best hero outside of Tel'Annas, I would say, in that lane. So yeah, that is my advice to you. Next is Alice, who is one of the best supports. The problem that I mentioned before is that she's a true support, so I can't really put her in tier S. But other than that, she's amazing. She can get up to 800 units per second, which is the maximum speed in the entire game. So yeah, Alice is fun. Just make sure you have a decent team around you, or else you might be sad because you'll have to clear waves as Alice, which is never what you want to do. Next is Baldon. Baldon, I wanted to move him up like as high as I possibly could. I settled on here, right behind Alice. He's extremely good right now. Obviously, TJ loves him if you listen to the Valor series. There's a case to be said for moving him to S. He's extremely strong. His cooldowns are still a little bit long, so he can kind of get trouble if you wild charge in. But other than that, everything is so much easier for him to use, just so much more clean, so much less frustrating to play him. So I'm sticking him right here for now. Next is Mina. Talked about her a bit earlier. Mina is she's really good if you have good follow-up, because all of her support is predicated upon locking down heroes, and if there's no damage follow-up, then she's not doing much. Whereas, for instance, if you have an ADC in trouble, you can just friendship them away and put like a hissy fit in front of them, or in front of the enemy, so they can get away, right? So there's a completely different form of support with Mina, and so this is a situation where you really need to have allies that are on board, or else you're going to be super aggressive with Mina, you're going to hook them in, and you're going to have no follow-up, and it's going to suck. So I would kind of be very careful using Mina. You have to have good allies around you. So Mina's more of like a duo Q, trio Q type of hero. Whereas Alice, if you're feeling her and you're feeling like you trust your allies at least a little bit, then Alice is a little bit better than Mina, who just needs your allies to be right there, right then. Next is Aram. I moved support to her #1 role. I dropped her down from 23 just because of the ADC meta lately. She can be very useful in certain situations, like if you're going to hold on an assassin, but these days assassins are pretty good at avoiding her. A lot of times she seems just pretty much useless because he's just walking around with no mobility, and then she's just getting kited down by a marksman, which doesn't feel good. But obviously, she's always going to be ridiculous for her ability to deal with any melee heroes, so couldn't drop her too far. Next is Kali, who jumped up a pretty good deal. Part of that is being a soft counter to Sephra, because she can completely outrange her. Part of that is being able to win any poke battle, essentially. Like if the opponent has, like an Ignace and a Violet, the old composition, or I guess Sephra, then you can sit back, throw out your ethereal pulse, and again, just outpoke anyone. So that's her value. Obviously, I'm sticking her in tier 1 because of her situational status. So I'm not going to put her in tier S, really, because in the wrong composition, she's really, really bad, especially if you're getting dove by assassins and your team's not helping you. But putting her up here because of her amazingness, if that's a word, in certain situations. This next one hurts me. I had to drop Jinnar pretty far because he just gets absolutely wrecked by Sephra, and no one knows that better than me, who went from a Jinnar main to basically a Sephra main, at least when I was playing on NA. Sephra just completely dominates Jinnar in every single way. She even beats her in the early game, and she hardly beats anyone in the early game, and that's just a sad sight. One thing is that Exuberance is a much shorter cooldown than Tide of Life, assuming that Sephra isn't massively reducing cooldown by using her auto attack after Water Spirits. But the thing is, even if it's a lower cooldown, if it gets shut down once, he's probably going to die. It's very hard for Jinnar to go in, use Exuberance, have it shut off by Tide of Life, and then get out alive, because she will just hunt you down afterward, and he's basically useless after Exuberance is over. So I guess you could just fake a go in with the Exuberance and then have her burn Tide of Life, and then you're like, okay, I'll go in after that, but that's unlikely to happen. That's unlikely to work, I would say, because then you just don't have Exuberance for a team fight, potentially. That's a really poor use of that. So yeah, very much shut down by that. And in general, people have just gotten used to Jinnar, have gotten used to running away. They just let the Exuberance run out, and then they kill him. So not as good as before. And also, just side note, it's very sad as someone who was very much an advocate for Jinnar once he got his buff, and I was the leading the hype train about Jinnar being a great hero a couple months ago. I'm very sad to see that he's become just a brain dead hero. I see so many terrible players on Jinnar, and it makes me very, very sad because they have no idea how to play. All they do is press the exuberance button and run up and kill people. And they don't even auto attack either. They don't even know the reason why his exuberance is good. I don't know. It all just makes me sad. Let's just move on. Zill's still fine. He's a kind of a fallback hero when you don't get Zephys, when you don't get some of the junglers. He's really good if you need to mix it up. He's the only real mage assassin. Jungler, I mean. He's the only real mage assassin jungler. So if you need magic damage in your team, for instance, you can run Elsu mid and have a Zill and not be lacking in magic damage, and they'll be fine for your team. There's a couple other situations as well, like against Joker, for instance. If you're trying to counter Joker, one of the best parts about Joker is that he can get away from assassins by using pick a card, any card, but he can't get away from Zill because he does magic damage. So there's very situational times when you want Zill. He does get shut down by things like Zinnia, for instance, the Immortal Cop in general. So buyer beware, but there are very situational situations in which he is extremely good. Moving on to the Flash. The biggest problem with Flash is that his poke damage requires him to dash in, which is not great. In the right situation, again, he's amazing because you can completely take apart a backline. But if he gets stunned, then he will die. And that is a problem, especially towards the late game when people have ridiculous burst damage and can take him out in a couple shots. Next is Loriel. Loriel's kind of been in the same area for a while now. She doesn't really have the burst of other heroes. Yeah, I can hear the Loriel mains complaining already. If you get in Smite, yes, you can burst people down with all the true damage that she does, but that requires people to play in your Smite. You have to have amazing positioning, or they have to just fall into your trap in order for Loriel to do her thing. Otherwise, she's not as mobile as other heroes. Her blink, if you're blinking away, it's problematic because you don't get the shots off, which means you don't get the cooldown, which means that they've caught onto you. So yeah, she's a very all-in hero, and sometimes it doesn't work out as well as you would hope it would. Moving on to Natalia. Natalia is really interesting because part of the reason why she hasn't been amazing lately is because Mina and Grak have fallen off a bit. I wrote here that if Baldon started receiving popularity, then perhaps we see more Natalia. And you saw that in the Valor series when I lost my mind when there was a Natalia Baldon combo. So yeah, Natalia basically relies on a setup for her. It's kind of hard for her to set herself up, even though it's a little bit easier than it used to be as of a few months ago, because all of her projectiles are a lot faster, Arcane Nova, Arcane Spirits. But if you land a couple of Arcane Nova, Arcane Spirits early, then you basically win the game because you get to snowball from there on, and they can't really do anything about it because of the buff to her lethal raise as well. Moving on to Ignace, the last of our mages in this string. Ignace, I really didn't know where to put him. It's very possible that he can be anywhere from tier S to tier 2 at this point. I'm not really sure. The nerf wasn't that bad, on paper it wasn't that bad, I should say. In reality, if you're not completely snowballing the game from level 1, or level 2 I should say, then you're losing a lot of games, or you're not winning a lot of games that you would have otherwise had an auto win, and that's problematic, right? Because he's not just completely broken, and to go from completely broken to dealable is a huge deal. He's still fine. He still could be a reasonably good counter to Sephra, but people are already kind of sick of him, right? They've played him so long that they really don't want to keep trying him. So he could still be really good, but people have to get back to playing him. Next is Valheim, who I'm pretty far down on. I dropped him pretty far. I just don't think he's good enough to play in the Abyssal lane because he won't scale as well as other marksmen, and it's a lot easier for the other marksmen to scale nowadays with the buffed melee minions. So I really don't like him in the Abyssal lane because he's not going to do enough damage to warrant him being there. I like him better in the Darkslayer lane. So if you want to run 2 marksmen, that's fine. Just put him in the Darkslayer lane. He basically acts like a Ryoma anyway because of his stuns. And The only reason I would put him in the Abyssal lane is if you're going to win the game in like 11 minutes, basically, if you have like Tulin and Richter on your team as well. Otherwise, I wouldn't put him there. I think he's almost specifically a DS lane hero. Moving on to the Joker. If I were to redo this list today, just 1 week after I posted it, I would put Joker a bit higher because it's clear how much the extra farm that he gets from the Abyssal lane helps him. Obviously, he might lose a little bit to something like a Wisp or a Tel'Annas because he might get poked out in the early game before he gets farmed up. But he gets farmed up a lot faster, even if he's under the tower, even if he's a couple hundred gold behind the other marksmen. Once you get to a certain point, once you build up Rank Breaker and Fenris Tooth, you're going to absolutely demolish them. And that is nice. It's a decent, it's not really a counter, but it's a decent response to something like a Tel'Annas. And his ability to burst is ridiculous. And yeah, I think I would put him a little bit higher if I were to redo this list just 1 week later. Next is Morin, similar to Joker in that he needs to get farmed up, but he needs to get even more farmed up than Joker, and he's basically punchless without it. Also, he can't really build Scorching Wind in the side lane, and that was such a powerful tool to him beforehand. So not having that not being able to do that, really painful for him. And yeah, he just needs to get farmed up, and there's just better options like Joker, like Wisp, like Tel'Annas, but he's still reasonable, so if you want to pick him, that's fine. Next is Irie. I didn't really know, I just kind of default placed her here. I still thought she was good. No one was playing her when I wrote this last week, but we've seen since then that she can be really, really good in the Abyssal lane. You get her farmed up, and she can be a counter to those ADCs. The only problem is that you basically have to outplay them. If they're playing very safe, it's hard for Irie to get in there even with her extra shadows because she's going to get shut down by the rest of the team. So I would be careful. You need to be really good with Irie in order to be able to play her in that Abyssal lane. But otherwise, she is a great pick. All right, moving on to Zuka and Scud. I kind of have them in the same spot because they're similar to something like an Irie, except they don't really quite have as much mobility. Zuka kind of does have that mobility, but his Skyfall isn't the same thing as Dew as far as completely shutting off the opponent in that area and being an escape. So that's why I have her under Irie. I think if I were to do this list again, I'd have Irie even higher and keep Zuka and Scud in the same place. But it's hard to put Zuka and Scud in the Abyssal lane and have them be successful as an ADC shutdown. And if you put them in the DS lane, then there's so many good duelers in there that they're having trouble. And people are just more used to dealing with both Zuka and Scud that they don't just die to them tier 1 or level 1 or level 2 anymore. People know that the burst is going to come out, they play around it, and it's just harder for them to deal with, or harder for Zuka and Scud to deal with, especially since Zuka had his chi nerfed. Next is Emily, and Emily's feeling sad because she got outdone by a man dueler. Women duelers weep in their sleep because Emily cannot duel. She had her passive duel, and then Florentino came around with the gentleman's duel, and now she's sad. She only has her kick blade. She doesn't have a sword. Sad times. All right, moving on. Arduin. Arduin is better. I don't know how much better. I haven't seen him in pro play very much. I tried him myself. He seems a lot better, but I want to look to the Arduin mains to be able to show how much better he is. It is a big difference having that extra attack speed and the Bloodlust be on 25% lower cooldown. But again, he doesn't have the same. He still doesn't have the same ability as something like a Malik to stay alive for forever, especially because Bloodlust only lasts for like 8 seconds, I believe. And Malik will always have his cleave. As long as he lands his second cleave, he'll be lasting a long time, doing a lot of damage. Arduin's better. I just don't know. He's still not at the level of Malik, for instance, and I don't know if he deserves to be above the heroes above him because there's just a lot of competition. Next is Max, my old flame. Max, the problem with Max is that he got slightly nerfed because of the loss of 10% gold to minions in tower range, because he's going to lose a lot of the duels in the DS lane, even more so now than before because of the emergence of Richter and Florentino. And even though he's amazing at taking out the backline and even assassins, if he's losing his lane, then he's not going to have the punch to kill them. But he's still really good in the right situation if you have the right targets to jump on, and if you want to have a lot of global vision. Having the vision is really underrated because you can spot if someone is doing something. You can spot if a hero is alone. Like, a lot of times kills aren't capitalized upon because you think there might be, heroes hiding in the bush behind them, so you don't pursue it. But if you see no one there after you pop liftoff, then it's an easy way to get kills. So I think that global presence, now that people are more aware of it because of Illumia, they might start picking Max more because of that the global vision that he provides, which is really nice. Lastly, we have Batman. Batman is in a tough place because of both Lindis and Elsu revealing him all the time, which is annoying. Also, people are already used to dealing with Quillin, so Batman's a piece of cake in that regard if you compare the two. So yeah, it's just easier to deal with Batman. People are used to dealing with invisible heroes coming up and killing you. So yeah, he's still nice because he can be invisible for longer than Quillin, so you can kind of be a roaming ward, a scout, as you will, and get around and kill people. It also makes it so that if you have, for instance, like a Violet or Lindis, a marksman jungler, they have to continuously be afraid for themselves and not really extend out onto the map, and that can kind of indirectly allow you to win the game. All right, time for my water break and time to just check on a couple things. All right, moving on to tier number 2. This one has fewer heroes. Tier 1 had a ton of heroes. I think it was like 26. And that was partly because I moved heroes down. I'm like, I gotta move them back up. I think it was like Scud and Zuka. Like, I can't quite put them in tier 2. That's no bueno. But let's move on to tier 2. I did drop Kilgoth down to tier 2 from tier S. Not having Scorching Wind hurts him a lot. He can't really duel as well as the other heroes there. He has 0 CC as well. Having CC immunity is fine, but that just basically allows him to get away and doesn't really help. It helps him do a little bit, but not as much as having the CC helps deal with those heroes in the first place. If you are a hero like, I don't know, Richter or Omen or what have you. Thane I moved down as well. He's just a bit limited because of his abilities that are kind of slow moving, and his King's Glory isn't something that holds people down. It just kind of finishes them off. And even though that can be a good way to zone people out, it's not the best when you're trying to set up a kill. It's good for securing a kill, but they had to be low in the first place. So you'd rather just, shut them down for your marksman to take them out, and also to prevent your marksman from getting hurt in the first place, which is a big deal. Because a lot of the other supports in here will prevent your marksman from dying in the first place, and King's Glory cannot do that, at least most of the time. Pyrrha is next. Pyrrha and Grak, I'll just talk about them together. They've both been really good. They've both been benefited, I should say, by the support items, but they're still in kind of this general vague tier 2 area. Grak can't really help his backline because World Devour takes too long to cast, and he only has the small silence on his first ability. Pyrrha is kind of the same thing. She can only really pop her owl, I forgot what it's called, the Sentinel, and her Nature's Rally in order to stop people, and Nature's Rally has a bit of a cast time, and it also takes a while to stun them and all. So a bit harder for Pyrrha to save her backline, especially against super burst heroes like Kraknak and Quillin. It just takes too long for her to pop anything, and they can also probably just kill him through the Nature's Rally anyway. So yeah, she's pretty good in the early game. Both these heroes can be really good in the early game, both from like picks and being able to just keep people topped off for like an abyssal take, but start falling up towards late game. Next is Lumber, who's kind of just a poor man's Alice. He can be very good though, and he is definitely very much benefiting from like Tide Color's Mark, because they both operate the same way. You just have to be around your allies. That's very nice. Obviously, Ring of the Fiend is good for him as well because he can tap his abilities like that Earth Splitter. Next is Ormar. I had high hopes for him. I wrote in the patch notes that I thought he was going to be amazing. I thought he was going to be like tier S or something, but just tier 2, unfortunately. He's kind of like just a poor man's Yebanet at the moment. When he gets in there and uses his ultimate, he heals, but he doesn't provide the massive zone control that Yebanet does when he pops Nature's Realm. so that's problematic. Also, it takes a while to use Unstoppable because he has a dash and then attack, whereas something like even Lumber's Rampage, it immediately stuns them, right? Whereas he has to dash and then attack, which takes a while, especially if he has low attack speed. And then Swagger, it's a really long time. If you've ever played Ormor, he kind of reaches back with his hammer and takes a long time, and that can really cost him sometimes. It's also really short range, so he's just kind of limited by his kit in general, despite the fact that the rework really helped him. He's very useful, but he's not top of the line. Next is Crixie. Crixie continues to just fall behind just because the other heroes around her are getting better and better. She can do a lot of things well. She's the most all-around mage in the game, I would say. That's other than the super duper ridiculous ones like Liliana, but she's a good overall all-around mage, especially for newer players who want to wean themselves off of the point and click stun like Valheim. Yeah, she can burst pretty well once she gets her build going. She has good AoE damage with both her Mischief and her Moonfall, but she just lags behind the other OP characters in the game, and there's nothing special about her. That's the thing. There's nothing like she can do like a Kali who can completely outrange someone. She can kind of outrange people, but not completely. So that prevents her from being like a specialized pick. All right, moving on to Janus. People are starting to realize that he's not OP. I remember when the Winter Wonderland patch came out, people were like, oh my god, Janus is so amazing. And then they completely just looked over the fact that he lost 20% resistance on his ultimate. So yeah, he's not that great. People are just overreacting. And yeah, he's fine. He's fine. The biggest problem with him, he just takes a while to get farmed up. And his first wave clear on the monsters, if he's playing jungle, takes a long time. And so you basically just have to hope that your allies aren't dying while you get farmed up, which is problematic because most allies don't do that. Next is Gelder. I moved him up a bit because I realized that he was nice in the right situations. Zeus on Dynamiter showed that by playing him against a Florentino. You just kind of don't deal with people in the DS lane. You just shoot them from far away. And with his shields, you can kind of... I know people might be worried about shooting people far away with his exuberance and are worried about the 10% gold reduction if you're playing him in the DS lane. But I've been playing him a bit, and what you can do is just shoot the minion wave. And when it gets close to the tower, you meet the minion wave outside the tower. And then you use Midas Touch and all that kind of stuff to get them away. And they can't really fight you. If they try to fight you, then you just lure them under your tower and you damage them and they get hit by a couple tower shots. So you're still able to get your full gold and it's still fine. And then you start doing tons of damage toward the end. And you're actually quite tanky, even if you build full damage, because you get massive shields if you build a ton of AP power. AP power, ability power. Okay. Next is Astrid. I thought she would move up higher than she did, but she didn't. The problem is that she's not really an auto attacker. For instance, someone like Omen, if he auto attacks, he gets tons of things, right? He gets his thirst passive, which does true damage, makes him attack faster. It also lowers the cooldown on 2 of his other abilities. Like, there's so many things that happen when he auto attacks. Lubu, when he auto attacks, it's first of all, it's combos perfectly well with his abilities. It also heals him when he has Conqueror up. Everyone else who is an auto attacker, their auto attacks do so much more for them than it does for Astrid. Whereas Astrid just gets her shield back faster, and it's just not fast enough for her to have much of an effect because people can just burst her down through her shield, which it doesn't make up for the massive healing that other heroes get when or the resistance, like from Untouchable, for instance, that other heroes get. And yeah, it's just weird as well because she has abilities that don't correlate with her attack speed. Like, her passive helps because of her attack speed, but her spin slash helps give her more attack speed. But I don't know, it's just her kit's kind of weird. And I can't really tell if she's supposed to be an auto attacking hero or if she's just supposed to be an ability oriented hero. It seems like neither, and that's the problem with her right now. She's not as good as I thought it would be, as I thought she would be with the buff. Next is Arthur. I dropped Arthur down a bit, finally. I was about to do this a couple of patches ago, back with Samurai Gamers. But then he got a buff where he got 80 armor. I'm like, I can't really drop him now. And then finally, yeah, I can drop him. He's just, he can be easily dueled in lane. He's like a jack of all trades, but he doesn't do a lot of them well. He can get around the map pretty quickly, but his damage is kind of meh. His durability is kind of meh as well. Even with the armor buff from a couple patches ago. And yeah, he's still fine. He's just not great. Next is Butterfly. Butterfly's still fine. She's one of the lowest junglers on this list though. But she's still fine. She can do stuff. She can still do stuff. But she's not great in any way. Next is Wukong. Wukong can be better than Butterfly if you land your crits at the early stages of the game and get going. If you don't though, like there's just the very real threat of Wukong being a complete disaster because he doesn't clear very fast at all because he gets no crits. Or he misses his crits on, you know, a squishy and then gets killed. There's just very real danger of him completely bungling a game because he misses all of his crits, and that's problematic. And even like it's nice that he can kind of get in, kill a hero, get out with his ult, but it's just not on the level of almost all the other junglers. And he has obviously like zero survivability if you're building him right, because you have to build him lots of crits, and that takes up a lot of slots in your build. Next is Slims. People know if you listen to the Valor series that I hate Slims. he doesn't have very long range to get his damage off, and other than his little jumpy thingy, he doesn't really have much escape. It just seems very easy to kill him. It takes a lot of time for him to build up. He seems kind of like a Morn in that sense. I guess he's not as quite as weak as Morn for that as long, but it takes him a while to get up, and he's very easy to kill in that time. And even when he does get up, he's still firing from very, very short range and doesn't have a great escape. So he seems very, very killable at all points in the game, and it takes him a long time to get his damage up, which is not great. And he doesn't really have the tools to be in the side lane, really. I mean, I guess we saw Tony Wright play him in the side lane, but it took so long. It took so long to get farmed up. His new role might be in the side lane, just because of how long it takes him to get farmed up in the jungle, but it just makes it hard to hit people with your spear if there's minions in the way constantly. Next I have Yorn, who got this weird nerf where there's a cooldown for Fafnir's Talon these days. He's still fine. The problem is that he has to literally stand still to get Fierce Shot off, whereas compare that to a Tel'Annas who can just kite back and forth, and yeah, you see the issue. Just compared to all the other marksmen, he can't really kite as well. He has to literally stand still, which is bad. You at least have to be able to kite, right? And a lot of times, like a Fierce Shot will miss, for instance, because if you haven't played Yorn before, the Fierce Shot all goes in the same area, and that's problematic. If you like miss once, then you're kind of screwed, because you don't get your burst damage off. So yeah, Yorn having to stand still really, really hurts him. Next I have Alistar. Some people who watch lots of pro games might be confused why Alistar is so low. He's good in pro environments when you have support around him, but in a solo queue environment, you're not going to have much damage, especially if you're trying to shut down like an assassin, for instance. You're not going to be able to get your full Magic Berry, Mages of Woe, Magic Prison combo on an assassin. So if you're trying to stop an assassin, all you're really going to be able to do before they kill you is pop Magic Prison, and then they're just going to run away, and you've done nothing, and you're probably chunked at that point as well. So not great in solo queue, I mean. So that's why he is this low. If you do have like a duo or trio queue and you can set it up and you have damage, like a Lindis, for instance, or even a Tel'Annas, then he can be a really good tool for you. But other than that, he's not great in solo queue. Illumia has been seeing a lot of play in professional matches. I've actually been playing her a bit lately, and I might have underestimated her actually. Just a week after I put this list up, I might have placed her too low, because I think I underestimated her abilities outside of her Cataclysm. Like her Divine Light and Bench actually do decent damage if you build her full AP. So what I've been doing is I build her full AP. I immediately get 35% CDR, cooldown reduction, by going over the Magi into Flashy Boots into Reyes Blessing, and then from there I just constantly throwing out Divine Lights and Banish and stunning people. And you can set up your combo so that you can... I've been able to 100 to 0 a Raz and 100 to 0 a Yorn. I've only played like 3 to 4 games of Illumia, and it's just so satisfying. But yeah, Illumia can be pretty nice. Cataclysm still no super long cooldown, but you can obviously reduce that. If I were to do this again, probably put her maybe towards the top of tier 2, maybe in the bottom tier 1 actually. But yeah, Illumia, despite what I said here, she's a little bit better than I thought. But let's move on to tier 3. Pyrrha not better than I thought. He was always like near in like tier 1 when I was doing like the old tier list, and he kept getting buffed, so I was like, oh, he's got to still be good, right? But everyone just completely passed him by, and in particular having to deal with Elsu is absolutely terrible for someone like Pyrrha, who would just get sniped down. And yeah, he's just in a really bad spot. This might even be too high, sadly to say. There's just like nothing really going for him. When he pops his ultimate, which I think is like Disciple of the Plague, it just gets him ready to auto attack, whereas others are just finishers or setups for an engage. And yeah, his ultimate just doesn't really help him that much. I think his ultimate needs to be buffed pretty significantly. All right, next we have Maganda. Maganda is the ultimate pub stomper. If people don't know who he is or what he does, then you can just auto attack in the early game and completely kill someone. The problem is if you don't fight him, if you just decide not to fight him in like level 1 or 2, then eventually you're gonna out level him and just kill him, and he's gonna have lots of trouble. Early game he's like an absolute beast, but if they fight you, but after that it's gonna be problematic. And I feel like everyone who complains about Maganda being overpowered is probably in gold or lower, or never played ranked to begin with, because they just decided to fight Maganda and like, oh my god, why is he killing me? And your problem was fighting him in the first place. Next, Diao-chan. People for some reason think she's OP, and it's the same thing with Maganda. It's like, yeah, if you get frozen by her, then you're gonna get screwed, but still don't get frozen by her. You have to predict where she throws her diamond dust. And yeah, anyone who has any idea what the opposing Diao-chan is going to do should have no problem with her and take her out. And especially in something like a 2v1, she's gonna have a terrible time unless they both clump up on her diamond dust, in which case you're probably playing in silver. So it's she's not very good. And if you're having trouble with her, or you think you're really good with her, you should consider the level of play where you're at. I'm very sorry to reveal the truth. Next is Fennec. Fennec has been completely neutered. He's able to kill towers like it was nothing, and now he can only do max 1,000 damage, which is really bad for a Thieves Mark. Actually, I should probably change this description. Oops. This is from the last thing. But yeah, he can't really kill towers easily anymore, and that's very bad because he used to be solely based on objectives. Now he kind of has to engage in team fights as well, which really hurts him because he needs to stand there and fight. And it's basically a worse version of Yorn, because Yorn can just stand there and chunk you without having to pop the Thieves Mark in the first place. Yeah, and he's very, very little CC. He can only CC with his Chain Hammer Cyclone, and that's not good enough for that. So yeah, pretty far down. He can still do damage, so he's not at the very bottom of the list, but that's all I can really say for him. Next, we have Toro, good old Toro, who I moved up from tier 4 for the first time. Most of that is because he is the beefiest hero in the game, literally and figuratively. And the reason why he's good now is because there's like poke comps are in vogue, especially with being able to buff them up in the abyssal lane. And poke heroes, they just kind of shoot what's in front of them. They don't really have the ability to flank or go around because they'll just die. Right, so they poke from the back, and the Toro's just standing there absorbing it all. Then that's not bad, and in the right situation, you can actually help your team win. So, yeah, good job, Toro. Next, Ragnar. I'm extremely low on Ragnar. I think being able to save your backline with CC is extremely important at the moment. Being able to cleanse doesn't really do anything if you can't get the assassins off your backline. We saw multiple times, for instance, in the Valor series where there was a setup for a squishy by the Raz, and there was just no follow-up CC, and having no CC is really, really bad. And just because you can purge out CC doesn't really help you, because you're still not going to win the team fight because they still have damage and they still have more CC. So yeah, Ragnar, not very good. better just have Toro. And I'm not kidding. Next is Wiro. Wiro just has extremely long cast animations, very, very much like Omega. Whereas you're trying to get your stuns off, and they just take a metric eternity to go off. And so I'm sorry to do this to the new hero, but yeah, it's just not very useful. Even if you try to use your 2-1-2 land side, they can stun them out. It can stun you out of it, which is absolutely terrible. I don't know why that's a thing. It should go off when that happens. I don't know. It's just really bad. Next is Omega. I moved Omega all the way up to tier 2 earlier because I thought he'd gotten pretty good after his buff. And I wasn't wrong. He got a lot better after the buff, but just not as good as I thought. The problem again here is that everyone else is so good that it's hard for him to compete. I'm complaining about all these heroes, but they're all like very, very useful. Whereas Omega, he just got into the useful territory. He didn't actually get as good as these other heroes, unfortunately for him. His first ability takes way too long to go off. His second ability is a lot better now. But his third ability, Exterminate, it's hard to get off because you need to get in front of them in the first place. And that kind of subjects you to a lot of punishment, especially because you kind of have to play him as a support. He's never going to win a duel in the DS lane. So when you use him as support, he doesn't have any defensive tools other than CC, and that makes him a pretty big target. All right. Lastly, let's get to tier 4. Tier 4, Toro is just extremely hard to use, and it feels like playing with a handicap under 40% when you had to constantly fight under 40%. I should mention again, all these heroes are like, it's the same thing I mentioned multiple times. All these heroes are in tier 4 because all the other heroes moved ahead of them. Not that they really have dropped to tier 4, right? I guess Taro is kind of an exception from a couple of patches ago. But if, for instance, if I included heroes in their states from like 6 months ago, then these heroes would be like tier 2, and those heroes would be like tier 6 or something like that. Because the heroes as they are now are definitely better than they. With Tara being this whole exception, are in a better place now than any of the bottom heroes were as of like 2 months ago. So Tara, it's just really hard to play. I will say that I got a comment here on the bottom, and if you want to know how to play Tara, the guy who wrote the guide for Tara on my site, the guy who wrote the guest post, Nick here. He has this video, and I was blown away. I definitely recommend you guys click on this video because it's absolutely nuts. The things he's able to pull off with Tara. So that is my shout out to you, Nick, and anyone who loves Tara. Go click on this video. It's nuts. He basically bullies out an Irie the entire time. People are constantly rotating over to deal with him, and he just shrugs them off like it's nothing. So yeah, go click on this video if you want to see some good Tara play. Anyway, next is Vera. The biggest problem, and I've been writing this for a while about Vera, is that she's a dueling hero that sucks in the early game, and that's really problematic, right? If you can combine Vera and Maganda, for instance, into one hero, then it'd be amazing, right? You'd have like a great great level 1 hero who can duel like crazy, bully them out of the lane, and then because you're bullying them, you're able to get them farm going, and because you have the farm going, now you can delete people. If you can combine those two heroes somehow, then they'd be amazing. The problem is Vera is so bad at tier 1, or level 1, excuse me, that she gets bullied out of the lane. It's hard for her to get to that farm, and it takes her like 3 or 4 items to start chunking people down, and you need 4 to 5 items to 100 to 0 them. And if you don't 100 to 0 them, then you're going to die because she doesn't have her cooldowns if you don't kill people. So that's the problem with her. Again, she can be reasonable. Her point and click stun can be nice if you're having to deal with like assassins, for instance. And that might be a way that pros use her in the future. It's just that there's just better heroes out there, and pros don't need to rely on point and click stuns. So you can still use Vera if you're dealing with something like a Quillin, for instance, or like or a Kriknak. You can maybe 100 to 0 them since they're really, really squishy. But you need to have really good positioning and really good timing and really good predictive skills in order to do that. And in which case, you're probably better with another hero. All right, last hero, number 79, is Zinnia. And Zinnia, I just had to put him at the bottom because I played this one game. It was the most frustrating thing in my entire life. Every single freaking sand race just went past people because it's impossible to land, and every single sand punch just lasted like nothing, 0 time. It's not even CC, and the dust devil hits one hero, and it's very, very sad. So I know there's like Zinnia mains out there, and I'm sorry, but most frustrating hero in the world goes to Zinnia. Okay, that will do it for my tier list. Here's some other pro tier lists if you don't agree with me. I would say that Rez is a bit far off mine, and he is a pro, so keep that in mind. It's probably leaning towards, you know, pro play as well, if I'm guessing. And then the other tier list here is from BM Gaming, mostly made by Neo, who is the coach of them, and he's a former player for Toxic and Immortal. So if you want to go and check that out as well, make sure you do that. That will be it for me. Thank you for listening to me from this undisclosed location in the UK. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel and go to D2AoV.com. Thank you very much for listening. See you guys next time.